House of Representatives agreed to the Senate amendment to the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Defense Act, signed Pernell P. Charles, CD, JP, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Sorry. Senator Morris.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Whereas there is a need for the provisions of the standing orders of the Senate of Jamaica to be aligned with standard practices and procedures, be it resolved that a comprehensive review of the standing orders be undertaken, and be it further resolved that this motion be referred to the Standing Orders Committee for consideration and report. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris. Well overdue on that.
Mr. President,
Proceed, Senator.
I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the Senate thank His Excellency, the Governor General, for his gracious speech delivered to both Houses of Parliament on the 9th day of February 2017, approve the plans and programs outlined in his gracious speech, and place on record its appreciation for the performance of the government during the financial year 2016-2017. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you very much, Senator. Leader.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move under the Terrorism Prevention Act, the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Gaming Machine Operators Order Resolution 2017, whereas Section 15 of the Terrorism Prevention Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, imposes reporting duties on certain specified entities, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides that the Minister may designate any entity as an entity to which the provisions of Section 15 of the Act shall apply, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides for the aforementioned designation to be made by order subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas on the 9th day of June 2017, the Minister made the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Gaming Machine Operators Order 2017, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as a Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity, Gaming Machine Operators Order Resolution 2017. And 2. The Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity, Gaming Machine Operators 2017, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 16th day of June 2017, is hereby affirmed. And under the Terrorism Prevention Act, the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Public Accountants Order Resolution 2017, whereas Section 15 of the Terrorism Prevention Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, imposes reporting duties on certain specified entities, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides that the Minister may designate any entity as an entity to which the provisions of Section 15 of the Act shall apply, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides for the aforementioned designation to be made by order subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas on the 9th day of June 2017, the Minister made the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Public Accountants Order 2017, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as a Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Public Accountants Order Resolution 2017. And 2. The Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Public Accountants Order 2017, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 16th day of June 2017, is hereby affirmed. Under the Terrorism Prevention Act, the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Casino Operators Order Resolution 2017, whereas Section 15 of the Terrorism Prevention Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, imposes reporting duties on certain specified entities, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides that the Minister may designate any entity as an entity to which the provision of Section 15 of the Act shall apply, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides for the aforementioned designation to be made by order subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas on the 9th day of June 2017, the Minister made the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Casino Operators Order 2016, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. I believe that should have been 2017. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. This resolution may be cited as a Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Casino Operators Order Resolution 2017. The Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Casino Operators Order 2017, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 16th day of June 2017, is hereby affirmed. Under the Terrorism Prevention Act, the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Real Estate Dealers Order Resolution 2017. Whereas Section 15 of the Terrorism Prevention Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, imposes reporting duties on certain specified entities, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides that the Minister may designate any entity as an entity to which the provisions of Section 15 of the Act shall apply, and whereas Section 15.2 of the Act provides for the aforementioned designation to be made by order subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas on the 9th day of June 2017, the Minister made the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Real Estate Dealers Order 2017, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. This resolution may be cited as a Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Real Estate Dealers Order Resolution 2017, and the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Real Estate Dealers Order 2017, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 16th day of June 2017, is hereby affirmed.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. One minute. Senator Morris.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it.
I beg to move that the motion be affirmed.
The question is that the motion so ably moved by Senator Morris be approved. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it.
I just want to...
No, it's okay. You go.
Okay. Mr. President, I just wanted to ask a question here because I had tabled the resolution from last December in terms of with regards to the accessibility of the Parliament, and I had sent an email to the leader of government business asking about taking that resolution because it has been on the order papers for a long while, and I'm aware that there are other members who have other resolutions. And I asked the question within the context of I've seen where the resolution for the State of the Nation debate has been tabled and is being taken on the same day. And I don't understand what is the reason for that, but it just seemed to be a little bit unfair in light of the fact that you have so many motions on the order paper and, no urgency is given to taking those resolutions. So I would want to know what is the situation with that and what is the timetable for taking those resolutions.
I would ask the leader of government business to respond, but I don't know if you heard the inquiry. Senator Morris was inquiring about the motion that he has relating to accessibility of Parliament. If you could give some indication as to when that would be heard or taken. And also, will you allow me to finish, please? And also, that there are other motions on the order paper which he's inquiring when and if you would be intending on taking those. And he's also making a general complaint that the State of the Nation is starting with those motions outstanding. Did I sum it up correctly, Senator Morris? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm unable to give a timeline in respect of the resolutions, but I'm happy to reach out to the leader of opposition business in the Senate and discuss a schedule. It's my recollection that it was asked of us when we were all caught, I suppose, a bit by surprise when we were unable to finish the State of the Nation in the last parliamentary term, and the request was that we have it early upon the completion of the sectoral debate, and this is what we're doing. So we will I'll contact Senator Golding, and we can work out a schedule not only for the completion of the State of the Nation, but for taking of resolutions with recognition always of the priority given to the legislative agenda. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. May I just inquire from both leaders? I had written you concerning a voluntary. I beg your pardon? Oh, you have not? Okay. You just got the letter yesterday to Senator Golden. So do I have your undertaking that both of you will discuss the contents thereof? I beg your pardon?
I'm happy to discuss those contents with the leader of government.
And I authorize you to share its contents with your members. Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise here in Gordon House, Jamaica's noble House of Parliament, to do the honorable task of opening the State of the Nation debate for this financial year, 2017-2018. I give thanks to the Almighty Creator, who through him or her, all things are possible, including me being here in this moment. Mr. President, it is indeed a great privilege of mine, afforded by the confidence of our Prime Minister, the Honourable Mr. Andrew Michael Holness, to serve the people of Jamaica in this manner, and to him I am grateful. My gratitude only begins there, Mr. President. I give thanks to my parents, only one of whom is witnessing this moment physically today. And that would be my father, Mr. Chapman Longmore Sr., who is sitting up there. And he, Mr. President, is the definition of father. I give thanks to my mother, who passed away, ironically secondary to health issues, almost 15 years ago, though it feels like yesterday. And only my brother, Chapman Jr., knows like me the mother she was. Mr. President, from both sides of my family, my mother's side, the Garibs, who arrived in Jamaica as indentured Indian workers settling in South Clarendon, and my father's side, the Longmores, who originated as a product of a child born to a Scottish plantation owner and his slave. From both sides, Mr. President, I am the first to be standing here in Gordon House in this capacity, and I am grateful. I give thanks to my husband, Alex, and my 2 young sons, Axel and Neo, for the love and support they give me, even when they are not aware they are doing so. I give thanks to my extended family and friends, including those on Facebook and those who are genuinely there for me. I would also like to give thanks to the people of Northeast St. Elizabeth and Eastern St. Andrew, who on both occasions when I plunged myself into representation and politics at very short notice, they embraced me with tremendous support and appreciation. On those 2 occasions, Mr. President, I had 2 persons by my side, my friend Lottie and my cousin Ernest Jr., and they're both here today, and I thank them for their belief in my capabilities. Mr. President, today I will be presenting on a significant functioning of government, that of the management of the nation's health. And in doing so, I must congratulate the Honourable Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health, for its efforts at the ministry, where under his leadership we have seen indications of his responsive, proactive, and efficient manner of caring for our nation's health. Under this Minister of Health stewardship, we have seen a number of initiatives aimed at reducing the significant impact of disease in Jamaica. Minister Tufton indicated a paradigm shift to health care. And Mr. President, I underscore this paradigm shift. But I will also be expanding the thinking and not only apply it to the approach for the management of our physical health. Yes. Mr. President, the World Health Organization, and by extension us here in Jamaica, define health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. Now, Mr. President, I am old school in my approach to a lot of things, and that includes the serious business of providing health to our nation. And so I went back to my roots of when I was first introduced to the concept of healthcare delivery, which was when I started medical school. At that time, the definition of health that I was taught right here at the University of the West Indies did not stop there, but also included a dimension that impacts significantly on the health of our people and our nation. And that, Mr. President, is a tenet of spiritual health. Yes, back then, the definition of health included dimensions of physical, mental, social, and spiritual facets. These, Mr. President, are the facets of health I will be presenting on today. Indulge me as I will be elucidating on what I call a holistic preventative approach to healthcare. When considering the health of our people, we have to take into consideration certain baseline indices that we are working with. Information from the last conducted Health Lifestyle Survey of Jamaica and the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation reveals what most of us already know. We have an aging population where we see the life expectancy in 2015 of females being 77 years and that of males being 73 years, as compared to 1990 when it was 75.8 and 73.7 respectively. The significant majority of our people are in the prime productive years of their lives, 55.7%, being between the ages of 20 to 64. We have a literacy rate, Mr. President, that falls below comparative regional standards of being 86.6% for females and 86.6% for males and 91.4% for females. We have to bear these indices in mind when we consider the health needs and methods of healthcare delivery that should be tailored to our specific Jamaican population. The top leading causes of death in Jamaica, Mr. President, as we have been told numerous times, are cerebrovascular diseases or stroke, diabetes mellitus or sugar, ischemic heart disease, which is what they call high cholesterol, hypertensive disease, high blood pressure, and assault or violence. Mr. President, in recent times, we have had to get proactive rather quickly with the emergence of outbreaks of new infectious diseases, such as CHIKV and ZIKV. Lord only knows how many other Vs we will have to be faced with. However, a number of initiatives are being pursued by our health ministry to stem deaths related to these and other causes of physical disease, namely the Jamaica Moves campaign, which is an effort to combat non-communicable diseases and enhance our lifestyle in disease prevention. We also should recognize efforts to curb the overconsumption of sugar, especially amongst our young people. The revival of over 20 years, the oral health program through the National Dental Sealant and Fluoride Garnish programs in schools. A mosquito control and research unit, which is a collaboration between the Vector Control Unit at the Ministry of Health and the University of West Indies to develop strategies to effect mosquito control. We see with respect to the physical care of our young, vaccination targets are being met for BCG, polio, diphtheria, measles, mumps, and rubella, Hep B, and hepatitis B. Antenatal visits are at 8% of the healthcare visits at health centers. In 2016, 43.7% of pregnant women attended an antenatal clinic in their first trimester, as opposed to 41.5% in 2015. Family planning services accounted for 13% of the visits to health centers, with the majority of patients being between 20 to 29 years old. Mr. President, with respect to the utilization of specialty services, pediatrics accounted for 12%, obstetrics 11%, general surgery 11%, orthopedics 10%, ophthalmoplegia or eye 10%, and general medicine 9%. Mr. President, the significant majority of these physical manifestations of health are a result of a preventable cause of disease. That is why, Mr. President, not only are we to take a paradigm shift in preventing physical disease as exemplified by Minister Tufton, but we must embark on recognizing the expansion of that thinking into an approach of holistic preventative health care along the three dimensions of health I named before: mental, social, and spiritual. Let us take our attention now, Mr. President, to mental health, my field of work, being a psychiatrist. The mental well-being of Jamaicans has always been topical throughout our history and has even taken on more significance because of the situation of crime and violence in our society. I must point out, contrary to popular thinking, mentally ill persons are more oftentimes the victims rather than the perpetrators of violence. What makes the headlines, however, Mr. President, and why the mentally affected are oftentimes seen as being violent is because of the sensationalized effect of a mad somebody attacking the innocent. I underscore that the mentally ill are more oftentimes the victims. That being said, the mentally ill do commit violent acts, and the propensity to do so increases when there is concomitant substance use, as demonstrated by the MacArthur Violence Risk Assessment Study. Mr. President, the importance of mental health is not just about violence reduction in our society. It is about patients themselves who are affected and us as a society appreciating them as just so, being ill with a disease, just as you would be a hypertensive, a diabetic, or an asthmatic. As I say to my patients directly when trying to enable their understanding of their illness, it is just like any other chronic disease. Left untreated, it will reach a point so severe that you no longer can control it, but it will control you. But, Mr. President, therein lies one of the major issues we have to deal with when treating the mentally ill. the lack of understanding of the disease process and the concomitant stigma and discrimination associated with being diagnosed with a mental illness. And might I add, this stigma and discrimination extends not only to the mentally ill, but for those of us who care for them. For us to properly treat these individuals, there needs to be an emphasis on addressing this grave situation. I am happy to recognize a significant recommendation included in the report on mental illness and homeless addressing this need, with strategies aimed at reducing the significant stigma and discrimination mentally ill persons face, and likewise those who care about them. Mr. President, for us to treat the mentally ill, we must understand and accept them as those who are afflicted in this way. Mental illness in our society is not restricted to the severe situations that make the news, however, Mr. President. The Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation indicates that the third leading cause of disability in Jamaica in 2015 is major depressive disorder, whilst the seventh is anxiety disorders, which would include such situations as post-traumatic stress disorder. As are other mental illnesses in Jamaica, this may just be the tip of the iceberg. We here live in a society faced with many factors that contribute to the mental ill health, and as such, measures to prevent are of paramount importance, especially amongst our young. The Center for Disease Control, as well as the World Health Organization, are more and more finding evidence of the impact of adverse childhood experiences, or the ACEs, such as trauma, abuse of the sexual, emotional, physical, and verbal kind, neglect, and lack of bonding and attachment. These adverse childhood experiences, Mr. President, are shown to impact negatively on brain development, compromise function of the nervous and immune system, with resultant predisposition to problems such as alcoholism, depression, eating disorders, unsafe sex, HIV/AIDS, heart disease, cancer, and other chronic diseases. They are also likely to impact on the severity of an illness in someone who is genetically predisposed. We as a government, when addressing the health needs of our people, must be proactive in dealing with the effect of these ACEs. Mr. President, initiatives such as those being developed by the Ministry of Education, led by the Honourable Mr. Ruel Reid, to roll out parenting programs are steps in the right direction to impact these ACEs in our society. Allow me to envision an expansion of such a program, not just focusing on parenting, but an all-encompassing information campaign targeting those who attend our antenatal clinics. These are pregnant women with the future of our country who are attentive to information. Not only can you reach women at that very significant stage of their lives, you can reach expectant fathers. Because at no other time is a man more attentive than when a woman is carrying his child. And so, Mr. President, I envision a multimedia campaign that is tailored specifically for this population, that includes information on all dimensions of nutrition, growth and development, disciplining, conflict resolution, exercise, financial planning, spirituality, and the recognition of early signs of disease and disability. I would also love to see emphasis on the importance of the power of play within our society. Mr. President, play is not just for children. It is for teenagers, young adults, middle-aged, and the elderly. Yeah. And we must encourage our people to play. Mr. President, a multimedia campaign of this nature seen by expectant mothers could be done now to enhance the health of our population in the present, but also significantly our future generations by passing on valuable information in a well-timed manner. Hear, hear. This initiative by the Ministry of Education, Mr. President, is an example of what I speak of when I say we are taking an approach of a holistic prevention to health care. The other major hot-button issue related to mental health within our society, Mr. President, is cannabis and the decriminalization thereof. I happen to lecture about the subject matter, and there is absolutely no doubt that cannabis exacerbates mental illnesses, both in their onset and severity. There is also no doubt that there are beneficial effects to the cannabidiol component of cannabis.
Hear, hear.
That being said, Mr. President, there is a significant difference when a 10-year-old smokes weed, a 16-year-old smokes weed, a 26-year-old smokes weed, and a 65-year-old smokes weed. This is because of the varying stages of brain development and the varying impacts cannabis can have on said brain development. Without going into the neuroanatomical details, the young growing brain is negatively affected by the exposure to cannabis with resultant effects on their behavior and cognition. Mr. President, it is my opinion that it was reckless in the past to have unleashed these hazards on the Jamaican population, especially our young, without the necessary background research and concomitant public education program.
Hear, hear.
I am relieved to see where the Ministry of Health, under Minister Tufton's leadership, will be embarking on a public education campaign this year targeting vulnerable groups such as children, pregnant mothers, and motorists about the dangers of cannabis. This, Mr. President, is what I speak of when I say this government is taking an approach of holistic prevention to health care. Mr. President, the National Mental Health Strategic Plan 2015 to 2020 has been drafted and has significant recommendations to see the effective delivery of mental health care that stems around a community-based, deinstitutionalized approach and care principles that are integrated and responsive to especially vulnerable groups. There is significant attention paid to enhancing the social health of our people as defined by their ability to form satisfying interpersonal relationships with others, adapt comfortably to different social situations, and act appropriately in a variety of settings. Sadly, Mr. President, as are other aspects of healthcare, the funding for mental health is not adequate, with a significant portion being taken up by the Bellevue Hospital. That being said, significant work has been done to raise the standard of living and functionality of persons living with mental illnesses in Jamaica. And as in other aspects of healthcare, we have dedicated, hard-working staff that go the extra mile on a daily basis to see to the care of their patients, and they should be lauded and celebrated. Mr. President, to adequately care for the health of our people in this approach of holistic prevention, we must, as a government, seek to provide care, especially for those most vulnerable and limited resources. And so, I must recognize the efforts of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, led by the Honourable Shahini Robinson. The Program of Advancement through Health and Education, PATH, has seen an increase in its budgetary allowance to the tune of 33%, effecting a 30% increase in the benefits paid to approximately 360,000 registered beneficiaries of PATH. This, Mr. President, is what I speak of when I say the government is taking a holistic approach to prevention in healthcare. We see that in collaboration with the Inter-American Development Bank, there will be an enhancement of the school feeding program in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. The allocation to transportation allowances for past students has been increased fivefold to $115 million. A further $120 million in bursaries and grants will be available for past students moving from secondary to post-secondary institution. An additional $100 million will be provided to past students at tertiary level education. For the 15th anniversary of PATH, Mr. President, $15 million will be available for past students to fulfill their career aspirations. These, Mr. President, are initiatives that see directly to the mental and social well-being of every single one of those past beneficiaries, their families and communities. This government, Mr. President, is taking an approach of holistic prevention to healthcare. Mr. President, I cannot be talking about healthcare and not mention those amongst us who are otherwise enabled. Recognizing the strength and value of our disabled community is a significant step in the right direction for us as a people, and steps have been taken on both sides of this House to enhance the lives of our brothers and sisters who experience a disability. I celebrate that there is to be a public awareness campaign on disability issues and the Disabilities Act ensuring that our society understands the rights of persons with disabilities. There will also be a focused development of the first 2 codes of practice relating to the right of education and training and to employment. Mr. President, offices of the Labor and Social Security Ministry island-wide will be made more accessible with necessary ramps, rails, and bathroom spaces. Some frontline staff will be trained in sign language. I spoke of the ACEs before, the adverse childhood experiences. Children with disabilities are particularly prone to abuse and neglect. I am pleased to recognize that through the assistance of the IDB, a modern assessment center and multi-purpose facility was recently opened for the early stimulation program on Honourable Street in Kingston. The early stimulation program provides interventions for children with disabilities between the ages of 0 to 6 years. This expansion, which is at a cost of approximately $70 million, will see the construction of 7 new classrooms, a physiotherapy room, and a specialized play area. The additional facilities will enable the center to increase its enrollment by 40%. Additionally, with respect to efforts to address our disabled community since 2016, 500 persons with disabilities have been engaged in skills training and job placement interventions. 211 special needs children have benefited from assistive aids, speech therapy, and physiotherapy services, while their parents and caregivers have benefited from parenting workshops that provide an avenue for the positive interaction and development of coping skills and techniques. Mr. President, this is what I speak of when I say this government is taking an approach of holistic prevention to healthcare. We hear it almost every day, Mr. President. Water is life, and indeed it is. I would hope that there will be no need for me to expound on the health benefits of consuming the correct amounts of palatable water. The availability of clean water is critical to the nutrition and hygiene of our people. And so I must recognize the efforts of this administration to address our water woes. It impacts health. Under the stewardship of the Honourable Horace Chang, the NWC has embarked on the Kingston Metropolitan Water Supply Improvement Program, ensuring water supply to parts of Kingston and St. Andrew. These projects being developed to improve supply to St. Catherine via the content plant, to Portmore and the corporate area using water from the Rio Coba River through a public-private partnership arrangement and providing employment for over 600 Jamaicans. With the projected increase for demand along the northern corridor between Rio Bueno and Miami Bay in St. Anne, from the significant foreign investment in hotel and housing sectors in this area, the NWC is being proactive in increasing the capacity of supply. Mr. President, there is also plans afoot for the Rural Water Supply Upgrade Program being implemented by the Rural Water Supply Limited, targeting St. Mary, Trelawney, St. Thomas, East Rural St. Andrew, Clarendon, South St. James, Hanover, St. Elizabeth, and East Central St. James. The much needed initiative of rainwater harvesting in a number of rural schools, such as the St. Mary Primary, Rock Hall All Age, Gale Primary, Mount Agnes Primary, and Derry Primary, are being undertaken. Hand in hand with the health benefits of water supply, Mr. President, is the recognition of the impact of proper sewage management on the health of our people. We see again under Minister Chang's stewardship the Portmore Sewage Reconfiguration Project, which has brought improvement in the health condition of a number of communities in Portmore. Also in Majestic Gardens, Seaview Gardens, and Riverton Meadows, the Ellison Flats Wastewater Plant in St. Andrew, and the Boscobel Wastewater Plant in Portland. Work has now commenced to replace the Acadia Bay Farm Villas and Hugh Hendon wastewater treatment plants in St. Andrew and to rehabilitate Blackwood Gardens and De La Vega City in St. Catherine. Lioneltown Plant in Clarendon. All these are under the Caribbean Regional Fund for Wastewater Management Project. Some US $12 million will be spent on this project, Mr. President. These are initiatives of what I speak of when I say this government is taking an approach of holistic preventative health care. Mr. President, another dimension to this holistic preventative approach is that of considering the social determinants of health and enhancing those of our Jamaican people. Yes. The social determinants of health, as defined by the WHO, are the conditions in which people born, grow, work, live, and age, and the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of our daily lives. These forces include our economic policies, development agendas, social norms, social policies, and political systems. The Ministry of Local Government, under the Honourable Desmond McKenzie, spoke of initiatives that I must recognize as I relate to the health conditions of the Jamaican people. Social protection programs that include infirmaries and drop-in centers where we see infrastructure changes taking place at the Manchester and Portland infirmaries at a cost of $135 million, with medical station being included at the Manchester infirmary. The Trelawney Infirmary also benefited from infrastructural improvements to the tune of $5 million. The works at St. James involved the construction of a male and female ward to house 50 residents at a cost of $40 million. Matron's Quarter at the Westmoreland Infirmary at a projected cost of $20 million. Mr. President, in addition to enhancing the health of some 1,420 residents, each construction project generates employment for at least 300 people in the community. These infirmaries, Mr. President, along with the drop-in centers being developed, are what I refer to as an holistic approach to preventative health care. Mr. President, there's an adage that says we are what we eat. The source of our food and the intake of such is increasingly being recognized as being fundamental to our health and well-being. This is why, Mr. President, I am glad to see the initiatives within the agricultural sector to encourage us eating what we grow. Not only does it make good economic sense, it is also the healthier and wiser choice. Expanding agriculture in schools, the efforts to improve our markets and spaces where we get our food, efforts to improve our roads, drains, burial spaces, street lighting, all under Minister Mackenzie's leadership, are all impacting on our health, and measures to improve such are what I am referring to as a holistic prevention to health care. Mr. President, the work of the Social Development Commission cannot go unrecognized by me when I relate to the health of our people. The development of community parks and community centers is critical to the enhancement of our health, especially amongst vulnerable individuals. We see where community parks will be built in Duhaney Park, Tivoli Gardens in St. Andrew, Twickenham Park in St. Catherine. Work has started on a community park in Ulster Spring in Trelawney, Olympic Way in Kingston, and projections are the same for Clarendon, Hanover, St. Thomas, and Blenheim community in Hanover. When we provide community centers for our people to congregate, play, and communicate, Mr. President, we are seeing to the social health of our people, and again reflecting this government's approach of a holistic prevention to health care. Mr. President, I will now shift focus to the other dimension of managing our nation's health, and that of which I speak is healthcare delivery. Before I go any further, let me underscore how hard our healthcare workers work. Many go the extra mile without care for recognition and very little compensation. Many have options to go to earn the big bucks overseas and choose to labor here in Jamaica because this is their country and they want to build it. Many, Mr. President, carry water in baskets on a daily basis, and they do it with a smile on their face and satisfaction in their hearts because theirs is a labor of love, and I thank them. That being said, Mr. President, though there are challenges in healthcare delivery and significant strides have been made to address such, it is clear to all concerned that more needs to be done. In light of this, I am happy to see efforts being made by the Ministry of Health to channel the treatment of non-emergency medical conditions into primary care settings, allowing the emergency rooms to deal with more urgent illnesses. This approach not only enhances healthcare delivery by being more effective in treating patients, but also increases the efficiency with the limited resources we have. A pilot program to this effect is currently being undertaken in the emergency rooms of the Kingston Public Hospital, Bustamante Hospital for Children, Spanish Town, St. Anne's, Cornwall Regional, Mandeville, and Maypen hospitals. This is with the concurrent strengthening of surrounding health centers to facilitate the increased traffic by extending opening hours up to 10 p.m. We are now moving towards a computerization of the triage process, enhancing facilities for waiting and establishing customer service areas to provide advocacy and support for our patients. The health centers that have benefited from these are the Slipe Road Comprehensive, Glen Vincent, St. Jago Park, St. Anne's Bay, Mount Salem, Mandeville, and Maypen health centers. Mr. President, of note, with this new approach, there has been over 17% increase in the utilization of these health centers. The added benefit of improved workspace for healthcare workers is an additional reason for the replication of these efforts by the ministry. They will move to continue computerization of the triage process in 4 other hospitals, namely Maypen, Mandeville, Spanish Town, and St. Anne's Bay. An additional 4 hospitals and 4 health centers will be targeted for interventions, being Savlamar, Princess Margaret, Black River, and Anato Bay. Mr. President, we see efforts to develop an effective public-private sector pharmacy partner program. Under this program, the filling of prescriptions for public patients is outsourced to 17 selected pharmacies with approximately $17 million in value being accessed by public patients at little or no cost to them, being done through the National Health Fund. We see where the NHF continues to do good work in subsidizing the health sector in terms of infrastructural development and subsidizing drugs. Customer service improvements are seen at the drug-served pharmacies. You have now pick-up, drop-off, and pick-up services. Implementation of an automatic scheduling of drug refills for patients regularly accessing the NHF pharmacies. Electronic submission of prescriptions via WhatsApp number 5325007. Volunteerism and compassionate care. Mr. President, a compassionate care and volunteerism policy and an action plan for the implementation in the regional health authorities is being developed and being considered for approval. Allow me to share in this discussion around volunteerism a discourse I had with a cherished group of nurses I work with on the infamous Ward 21, who recognize what I previously mentioned as the significant challenge of stigma and discrimination amongst our mentally ill. Mr. President, I had just a brief conversation with them around the possibilities of mental health workers, such as themselves and me, volunteering 2 hours every 8 weeks to go out and educate our public about mental illnesses. Mr. President, they overwhelmingly supported such a proposal and would be ready to do it tomorrow. This, Mr. President, is what I speak of when I say a holistic approach to preventative health care. Mr. President, critical to healthcare delivery, as I mentioned, is the personnel who deliver and who are functioning within a system that needs to be reformed. We, and I say we as I'm one of such, continue to have concerns about decentralization. While we welcome yet another review of the regional health authorities, we are a bit wary as we have had 2 previous reviews in the past that have not been acted on. We hope action will be taken this time. Regionalization has added too much bureaucracy in the system, which has resulted in the slow response to the needs of healthcare workers. One very significant real HR issue that most healthcare workers face is a general lack of posts in the public sector, resulting in most persons being on contract with a reduction in benefits such as job security and pensions. It also results in the long delays of the promotion of healthcare workers. We still have many who have completed their training in specialist positions and are still at the basal level. This drives the specialists into the private sector, or drives them out of Jamaica altogether. Mr. President, a specialist in the medical field has to have an average of at least 10 years of medical training. A specialist nurse requires at least 6. These are not persons you just go to any job bank and get. These are valuable members of our society that children aspire to become. The stark reality of being required on a yearly basis to seek whether or not you have a job is not conducive to remaining committed and feeling appreciated for the hard work being done. On one end of the scale, we are laboring to enhance our students performing better in the sciences. Yet at the other end of the scale, the value and job security that one should appreciate and anticipate is not being experienced. This double standard, Mr. President, must be addressed. And again, I say, I am happy to see the Honourable Minister taking a full review of the operations at the regional health authorities that has been implemented since 1997 and has been impeding the effective delivery of health care to Jamaicans. A proactive and responsive government, Mr. President. Mr. President, we're gonna say it again. A number of initiatives are being undertaken to see the improvement of the nation's healthcare infrastructure. The Pan American Health Organization has completed a comprehensive report on health information systems with a resultant schedule for implementation. The Adopt a Clinic program, which has local and diaspora interests, has approximately 60 clinics being adopted. Public-private partnerships for drug serve windows with 17 private pharmacies where prescriptions are being filled, as I mentioned before, is in the works. Mr. President, there are a number of priority projects being recognized by the Ministry of Health to be undertaken in the next 2 years, starting immediately. The upgrading of the Cornwall Regional Hospital, technical scoping work to be done at Spanish Town, St. Anne's Bay, and Mandeville hospitals to view them being upgraded from Type B to Type A facilities. Technical and scoping work at the Maypen Hospital to upgrade from a Type C to Type B. The commissioning by June this year of the Linear Accelerator Cancer Treatment Center at Cornwall Regional, and by the first quarter of 2017, a similar facility at the St. Joseph's Hospital. We will also be doing scoping work at St. Joseph to see the possibility of a public-private partnership for the Center of Excellence in Oncology. construction of the Ministry of Health's corporate headquarters, beginning of construction of a children and adolescent hospital in Western Jamaica, collaboration with the University of the West Indies to develop a center of excellence with specific focus on cardiology and neurology. A working government, Mr. President. Other projects, additionally, there will be works to the tune of over $600 million to improve national healthcare delivery. The procurement of 2 mental health buses, health information system development throughout Black River and Darliston, upgrading of the elevators at the National Chest, Kingston Public and Spanish Town hospitals, completion of an isolation area at Spanish Town Hospital, Buff Bay Community Hospital and Health Center, project development in St. Anne's Bay Comprehensive Health Center and expansion of the St. Anne Health Department, procurement of critical equipments for hospitals in St. Anne, St. Mary and Portland, repairs to the roof of the Mapen Hospital, infrastructure and roof repairs to the maternity and delivery area at Chapelton Hospital, repairs to the roof of the Mandeville Hospital. A working government, Mr. President. Currently, there is an ongoing study financed by the IDB in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, the World Health Organization, and the World Bank. These deliverables being a 10-year national strategic plan, a 3-year implementation plan with costings, and indicators to monitor progress and achievements. Yes. We plan as we go, Mr. President. Mr. President, allow me to address what significantly matters. Mr. President, allow me to address what significantly matters to Jamaicans in their health care, that of financing and affordability. As it stands now, no person should be refused health assessment and evaluation at a public health facility. Significant strides have been made with respect to the access of a number of medications free of cost through government pharmacies and some private pharmacies that are part of the public-private partnership, as I mentioned before. Some diagnostic and therapeutic modalities are also accessible through the NHF. But we must recognize that this is not enough. That is why initiatives to develop the National Health Insurance Scheme are being pursued by this administration, and the Minister has given his commitment to update the nation on its implementation schedule. However, Mr. President, the stark reality is that the Jamaican economy is only now recovering from years of poor performance. And as such, the recommended budgetary allocation of 7% of GDP to healthcare is woefully short, with the reality being less than 4% of GDP. This reality, Mr. President, can only be adjusted by improving our economy and thereby improving our provisions for the health of our people. And so, I have to recognize in my holistic preventative approach to healthcare the initiatives of this administration to grow our economy. Mr. President, the impetus of this administration, led by our Prime Minister, is to normalize economic growth and prosperity, reversing decades-old complacency with stagnation. We are seeing positive turns in our economy, where the Planning Institute of Jamaica's review of economic performance in January to March 2017 shows the following. Real value added for the manufacturing industry grew by 1.1%. Real value added for the construction industry grew by 0.8%. The service industry was estimated to have grown by 0.5%. Real value added for transport, storage, and communication by 0.5%. Real value added for the finance and insurance service industry grew by 1%. Real value added in the wholesale and retail trade, retail and installation of machinery industry grew by 0.5%, and due to higher domestic demands, Mr. President, Real value added in the wholesale and trade repair, real GDP, Mr. President, is estimated to be growing by 1.1% in the fiscal year 2016 to 2017. The goods producing industry is estimated to have grown by 2.8% and the service industry by 0.6%. The industries which recorded the largest growth during the year, Mr. President, was agriculture, forestry, and fishing, up by 11.1%. Electricity and water supply up by 2.5%, and hotels GDP growth for the fiscal year 2016-2017 was estimated to be 1.1% and represents the 4th consecutive fiscal year of growth. We also note the continued improvement in the labor market, characterized by an increase in the labor force, with optimism about improved job prospects, increased employment levels, and lower unemployment rates. The economic growth outlook for fiscal year 2017 to 2018 is positive and expected to be 2 to 3%. Mr. President, it takes cash to care. Jeep brought down. Mr. President, it takes cash to care. We have hope. Mr. President, it takes cash to care in the holistic.
Only all over have a hope deficit.
Mr. President, it takes cash to care in this holistic approach to preventative health care. Yes. And our Minister of Finance, the Honourable Shaw, and his team that is steering our economy is making great effort to ensure we have a bit more cash to spend on the health of our people. This government, Mr. President, is taking a holistic approach to preventative health care by increasing resources to spend on the health needs of our people.
Mr. President, the Speaker's time having expired, may standing orders be suspended to allow her to complete her presentation?
The question is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the Speaker to complete her presentation. Those in favor? Against? Senator Longo.
Lastly, Mr. President, I can reflect. Lastly, Mr. President, I cannot reflect on the health of our nation and not recognize the elephant in the room. An elephant that impacts on all. An elephant that impacts on all serious business, Mr. President. An elephant that impacts on all I have spoken of. And an elephant that must be recognized and tamed. That elephant, Mr. President, is crime and violence in our Jamaica, Senator Morris. I believe I don't need to illustrate the impact of crime and violence on our health and what I just mentioned of our efforts to improve our economy. Mr. President, I honestly can tell you at times that I squint. I honestly can tell you at times that I squint when I look to read a screen or to watch the news in an attempt to lessen the blow of distress that I will feel when I see the results of violence in our society. I will not single out any heinous murders or crimes here, Mr. President, because they're all immeasurably horrific, and my heart aches for the loved ones left behind. This administration recognizes this need, Mr. President, and just earlier this week, we heard from the Honourable Minister Montague of the steps being taken to address this monster that concerns us, especially here in Jamaica, but also within the diaspora.
On a point of order, Mr. President, I think the member is misstating what the minister said. The minister said we should not be overly concerned.
That is not a point of order, Senator Brown. Continue, Senator.
President, it is a point of order with respect.
Lombard, Senator Knight, go ahead, please.
Where it is being said that the Senate is being misled, that is against the provisions of the standing orders.
What did she say?
Senator, continue, please. Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. President. This administration recognized this need, Mr. President. And just earlier this week, we heard from the Honourable Minister Montague of the steps being taken to address the monster of crime and violence within our society that impacts us here as well as our diaspora. Mr. President, he spoke of the Jamaica Constabulary Force having received 3,000 ballistic vests and 2,500 ballistic helmets for the protection of its members. Receiving 35 of the 200 pre-owned cars with another 45 cars and 15 pickups to be delivered in 2 weeks. 2 ships bought recently that patrol the seas and help us to stem the entry of drugs and guns. The procurement of 20 lawyers for the Jamaica Constabulary Force to assist in the building of cases. 5 of 20 mobile stations will soon be on stream for the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Increase in the installation of CCTV cameras in Montego Bay and have been started to be installed in Spanish Town and Kingston. A matter of fact, 21 have already. You want answers, I'm giving them to you. If you listen, you will hear. Far advanced in negotiating special traffic cameras with license plate readers to be installed across the island to track the movement of persons of interest and stolen vehicles, Mr. President. Additionally, the Special Measures Act is being put before the Joint Parliamentary Committee, and amendments to the Firearm Act are far being advanced. These, Mr. President, are just some of the initiatives being undertaken by this administration to address crime and violence. However, Mr. President, I am here to talk about the health of our nation. And doing so, let me reflect on my initial premise of the holistic preventative approach to the health of our nation. Mr. President, if you recall in the beginning of this presentation, I reflected on what I was taught many moons ago when I started medical school in 1993. In fact, that was the definition of health. Let me repeat. Back then, there were 4 dimensions to health: physical, mental, social, and spiritual. Mr. President, I have related to the physical, the mental, and the social dimensions. Indulge me in these last few minutes to expound on the spiritual health and how relevant its omission is to today's society, not just here, but beyond our borders. Spirituality, Mr. President, is defined as having compassion, the capacity for love and forgiveness, altruism, joy, and fulfillment. Not to be confused with religiosity. Spirituality encompasses religion, not vice versa. The majority of us, however, Mr. President, traditionally find our spirituality in their religion here in Jamaica. And that is one of the tenets we celebrate as Jamaicans. However, Mr. President, the stark reality of our society is that we are seeing on an almost daily basis the evidence of our loss of a sense of spiritual health and practice. We see the decay in our morality and our civic pride. We see the decay in our humanity and our one-lovedness. We see the fallout from this very significant omission in our definition and priorities in the dimensions of health. Mr. President, in addressing crime and violence, it is my belief that we have to address our spiritual health. It is the only way we would truly be taking an approach of holistic prevention to health care for our Jamaican people. Mr. President, I truly believe that we are led by a Prime Minister who believes in Jamaica and who has a dream for each and every Jamaican to be a part of a healthy society. As part of his administration, I share in this dream, and dare I say, I have my own with respect to the health of our country. I dream of a Jamaica that the practices of holistic prevention of disease are enacted. We are making steps to do that every day this administration goes to work, Mr. President. And only so can we see to the physical, mental, social, and spiritual health of our people. I thank you.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Longmore. I'm sure that the Senate will allow me briefly just to indicate that Senator Auburn Hill lost his father a few weeks ago, and he has asked, he's leaving shortly to go to St. Elizabeth to see about the arrangements. I'm sorry I didn't mention it before.
Well, Mr. President, we're very sorry to hear the sad news and wish to express our condolences to Senator Hill and his family at the loss of his father. And may the good Lord help you through your period of bereavement. Well, yes, on behalf of everyone, I'm sure. But yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hill. I think you said that you're going to St. Elizabeth now. Have a safe travel, and best of luck to yourself and your family. Leader.
Mr. President, it is now intended to proceed with the opening of the debate on the Integrity Commissions Act, whereafter we'll proceed with the registration of political parties regulations. So in respect of the first matter, the Integrity Commission Bill, Mr. President, we have tabled a list of amendments today, and they are significant. So the intention is not to proceed beyond the presentation, but to essentially walk through the changes and the amendments, and then at the next sitting or the proceeding one, the subsequent one thereafter, we will recommence the debate and proceed more fully. So, Mr. President, with that, I will indicate my pleasure at bringing this bill before this Honourable Chamber today. This bill, as members would be aware, is aimed at promoting and enhancing standards of ethical conduct for parliamentarians, public officials, and other persons by consolidating laws relating to the prevention of corruption and the award, monitoring, and investigating of government contracts and prescribed licenses. It provides for the establishment of a single body to be known as the Integrity Commission to promote and strengthen the measures for the prevention, detection, investigation, and prosecution of acts of corruption, and to provide for other related matters. Mr. President, this bill has benefited from a lot of thought and a lot of work. In 2012, I believe, the former Minister of Justice, Senator Golding, our very own Senator Golding, appointed an advisory committee to look into the matter of Jamaica's laws and institutions related to the combating of corruption and to make recommendations for the establishment of a single anti-corruption agency. The recommendations of the advisory committee led to the drafting of a bill, which was subsequently submitted to a joint select committee, members of which are present today in this chamber, albeit on different sides. And the joint select committee in 2015 recommended amendments to the bill that had been put before it. Mr. President, under this administration, the bill was reviewed by the Legislation Committee and was tabled in the lower house, where it was passed with a few additional but significant amendments, but I will speak more to that later. Mr. President, the Integrity Commission will be established as a commission of Parliament and will have the specific mandate to receive complaints relating to alleged acts of corruption and to conduct the necessary investigation and prosecution accordingly. It will assume the functions and powers of the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, the current Integrity Commission, and the Office of the Contractor General. Among the effects of the merger of these entities, is that there will be one mechanism for compliance created for both parliamentarians and public officials. This all remains as originally conceived, Mr. President. Today, however, we are tabling amendments which will strengthen the bill, which was tabled originally. These changes have been made working closely with the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General's chambers and have the support of Cabinet. We've undertaken great efforts to preserve a balance between matters of consensus within the Joint Select Committee and matters which were felt on deeper consideration to be important and necessary if the Commission should be given its best chance to operate successfully pending its initial reviews. I wish to quickly summarize the principal amendments. Firstly, Mr. President, we've created the post of an executive director. As has been stated as was stated in the committee and by members of the public and stakeholders who are familiar with the bill, questions were asked as to how a structure of 3 or more directors reporting to 5 commissioners who meet possibly 6 times a month could be as effective as one would want. And if organization needs someone in charge, and even more so, a new organization needs someone in charge of coordination and monitoring, budgeting, etc. So we've addressed that gap, Mr. President, by ensuring that there's a proper balance wherein the powers of the Commission have been maintained, they've not been compromised, but an executive director position has been inserted to ensure that the management of the body is seen to effectively. Consequent on that, Mr. President, we have changed the Director of Administration, which under the previous concept, or under the concept in the bill that was tabled, was a sort of pseudo-manager and also charged with responsibility for information, for complaints, and administration around statutory declarations. We severed the single managerial responsibility previously assigned to the Director of Administration and included that among the Executive Director's responsibilities, ensuring that the management responsibilities could be effectively expanded and separated from the important matter of information, complaints, and of course statutory declarations, which are a big part of the obligations certainly in respect of parliamentarians and public officials. The relevant divisions have been adjusted accordingly, Mr. President. So there is now a division of information and complaints and a director of information and complaints accordingly. Mr. President, we've changed the process of appointment of the commissioners to the standard method of appointment of commissions of Parliament. This, we feel, gives greater certainty to a process which already will be under pressure to perform. It was felt that on a balance of considerations, it was more important to use a known and trusted process which is more expeditious than to introduce a constitutionally untested process at this time. We believe that the method of appointment, such as was proposed in the bill, could benefit from broader consideration and potential utilization down the road as part of a broader policy as had been previously conceived in respect of the appointment of sensitive posts, but it was felt preferable not to test it with this important and new organization. Mr. President, we've expressly excluded political organizations and organizations formed for the purpose of supporting political organizations from the type of non-governmental organizations from which commissioners may be appointed. We have ensured that the prosecution and fine mechanisms built around the filing of statutory declarations ultimately require the filing of the statutory declaration, which was a gap discovered on review of the bill. We've also addressed gaps regarding the filling of vacancies and absences in respect of directors, again to provide for greater certainty and clarity of operations. And in respect of the new provision for the publication of financial information of the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition, the amendments which were introduced in that other place, we have added the right of the relevant politician to write to the Commission in the respect of an error, the obligation of the Commission to publish the correction, any related correction, accordingly. Mr. President, the final principal amendment is that we have extended the duty of secrecy beyond termination of the appointment or employment under this Act. Mr. President, as indicated, the Commission will carry out its mandate through divisions, namely the Information and Complaints Division, the Investigation Division, and the Corruption Prosecution Division. Mr. President, the Information and Complaints Division is established to receive, keep on record, and examine all statutory declarations. The division will keep and record any complaint or information in relation to any allegations of acts of corruption, allegations of impropriety, irregularity in the award, termination of contract, revocation of license, and so on, and will also, of course, have the right to request further information in respect of these statutory declarations. The Investigation Division will investigate allegations of corruption as well as monitor the award of government contracts. The division will also examine the grant, issue, variation, suspension, or revocation of licenses to ensure there's no impropriety associated with same. The Corruption Prevention Division, Mr. President, will, subject to the powers of the Director of Public Prosecutions, institute and have conduct of prosecutions where the Investigation Division has referred a matter to it for prosecution. The division is also empowered to conduct proceedings for the seizure, forfeiture, or recovery of property related to acts of corruption. And here again, we just note, Mr. President, that of course the DPP is the only power to which this director is subject in respect of the conduct of prosecutorial matters. Mr. President, the bill also includes the roles and functions of the executive director, as indicated, who will manage the day-to-day business of the Commission, who will coordinate the functions of the Commission, prepare the budget and quarterly reports, develop operational policies, and among other duties. Those other duties. Mr. President, the main features of the bill: the consolidation of the Contractor General Act, the Corruption Prevention Commission Act, and the Parliament Integrity of Members Act. The bill provides for the repeal of the Corruption Prevention Commission and Parliament Integrity of Members Act, and for repeal of all parts of the Contractor General Act which do not impact upon the performance of the National Contracts Commission. Until the new Procurement Act and regulations come into full force, it has been necessary to keep the provisions of the NCC alive in order to ensure that there are no loopholes. Mr. President, the bill is divided into 8 parts. Part 1 contains short title, definition of terms, as well as the principal objectives. There's a new Part 2A, which deals with the provisions for the establishment of the Commission, its membership, tenure, funding, and its reporting responsibilities. It notes that Part 2B, sets out the provisions establishing the Executive Director, outlining how he or she is to be appointed, how the details in respect of the functions to be carried out, and the delegation, any delegation thereof. Mr. President, Part 3 provides for the establishment of the divisions named earlier. Part 4 sets out the process for the submission and processing of complaints to the Commission by members of the public. Part 5 provides for the mandatory submission of statutory declarations by and powers of the Commission in relation thereto, including punitive measures for non-compliance. Part 6 contains provisions that are specific to the Investigation Division and that outlines the ambit of the powers of the Director of Investigation in the conduct of his functions. Part 7 provides for the obligation to keep matters before the Commission secret and for confidentiality to be observed in all matters. Immunity against suit is also provided for in that part for persons carrying out their functions under this Act in good faith. Part 8 provides for the repeal and transitional provisions where required under this Act. Mr. President, the bill also contains 6 schedules, which include the oath to be taken by the commissioners, the executive director, directors and members of staff of the Commission, the contents of the annual report of the Commission, the form of the statutory declaration of assets, liabilities and income of parliamentarians and public officials, a table of consequential amendments, the form of witness summons to be used in circumstances of inquiries, and matters in relation to the pensions and gratuities for Commission's officers. Mr. President, the bill defines an act of corruption as an act which constitutes an offence under the Corruption Prevention Act, or an offence related to the conduct of any person that constitutes an abuse or a misuse of his office, whether or not within the public sector, for the purpose of conferring a benefit or an advantage to himself or another person, being an offence arising under the common law or any enactment. The Commission retains the power to require filing of statutory declarations at the times that they are currently required by the Integrity Commission and the Commission for Corruption Prevention. But in addition to the salary threshold having been increased to $3.5 million per annum from its current level, Mr. President, the Commission will also have the power to require at any time, on recommendation by the Director of Information and Complaints, that a public official file a statutory declaration out of time, or require by notice in the Gazette any category of public officials to file a statutory declaration in respect of the specified period. So, and this, of course, would be submitted to the Director of Investigations if necessary. Mr. President, the fines have been significantly increased from the current levels, and the regime has become more robust. It now includes a default fine of $20,000 per month for every month of the event the non-compliance continues, as well as a court-imposed fine of $500,000 or 6 months imprisonment if found guilty of the offence of failing to file a statutory declaration, and up to $2 million or 2 years imprisonment where found guilty for knowingly providing false information in a statutory declaration or under an inquiry under this Act. Mr. President, earlier I referred to significant amendments made in that other place before the bill came to us. And in that respect, I was referring to new provisions which give the Commission the power to publish summaries of the statutory declarations made by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. These are in Clause 43B, renumbered 42(3)B. This provision is carved out, notwithstanding the secrecy and confidentiality requirements which generally apply to all other information, including other statutory declarations filed with the Commission. The power to publish this information, Mr. President, is one of the most, I believe, significant enhancements of this bill, and it's one that was specifically required for inclusion by the Prime Minister himself. And I make the point, Mr. President, as it's a notable and distinctive example of a political leader imposing requirements of transparency on himself while in power. A point worth highlighting as we continue as a nation to seek to build increased trust in political leadership and at all levels of society. Mr. President, the Prime Minister, through this provision, is ensuring that we institutionalize an unprecedented expectation of transparency and accountability at the highest level of political leadership. Mr. President, Clause 60 of the bill provides for periodic reviews of the bill from time to time by a committee of the House to be appointed for that purpose. The first review takes place no later than 5 years after the bill comes into effect. However, the provisions in relation to the publication of information by the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition are set for review within 2 years of the passage of the law, during which time their operation and possible expansion will be considered. Mr. President, there's also an amendment to the standing orders of the House of Representatives to establish a committee of Parliament to be called the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee. And that committee will be responsible for the monitoring and review of performance of the functions of the Commission, reporting to both Houses of Parliament on any matter relating to the performance of its functions, assessing the effectiveness of the Commission and the appropriateness of its procedures, review of the Commission's annual reports and submission of recommendations to both Houses of Parliament. Mr. President, I will now proceed to go through the bill clause by clause. Clause 1, of course, refers to the long title of the Act, and it is noted that it will not come into force on enactment, but will be brought into force by an appointed day notice. This will allow the administrative requirements to be put into place accordingly. Clause 2 sets out the defined terms used in the bill, and it's to be noted that the definition, there's a small amendment to Act of Corruption, it's not significant, and the definition of public function has been amended as well to address some circularity that, that seemed to be occurring together with the definition of public official. A public official has now been inserted in the definition of public function, which is wider in scope than the parliamentarian and judicial officer, which were previously named. Mr. President, the objectives of the Act are set out in Clause 3, and these have been already stated in my general description. And Clause 4 makes it clear that its provisions are not to be construed as limiting the functions of the Jamaica Constabulary Force or any other body that has investigative powers in respect of the commencement and continuance of investigations. And this term, Mr. President, of any other body was actually discussed and based on the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee to ensure that it remained as wide as possible. Mr. President, Clause 5 deals with the establishment of the Commission as a Commission of Parliament, as a body corporate, and when amended, will incorporate, for ease of reference, provisions relating to its reporting relationship with Parliament. Clause 6 broadly outlines the functions that the Integrity Commission will carry out, and these include investigation where appropriate, prosecution of alleged and suspected acts of corruption, taking necessary and effective measures to detect and prevent acts of corruption within public bodies, making recommendations to public bodies which may reduce the likelihood of the occurrence of acts of corruption, receiving complaints and monitoring and investigating the award of contracts, advising the Minister on the adoption of international best practices relating to the prevention of corruption, compiling and publishing statistics related to the investigation, prosecution, and conviction of offences relating to acts of corruption. And in carrying out these duties, Mr. President, it is specified that the Commission is under a duty to act independently, impartially, fairly, and in the public interest. Mr. President, Clause 7 permits the Commission to work with any person or body in the exercise of the functions conferred on it by this Act. In Clause 7, there's a subclause which provides that the court may assist on application made by the Commission and any other person or any other person or body to provide any information or document that the court deems necessary to assist the Commission in carrying out its functions. It's to be noted, Mr. President, in subclause 9, that the Commission shall disclose to the competent authority, as also defined herein, any information or document required by that authority to investigate or prosecute offences relating to corruption, financial crimes, or revenue collection. And this allows for a seamless interaction and sharing of information, which does not currently exist. Mr. President, Subclause 11 allows the Commission to be able to share and exchange information relating to the prevention, detection, investigation, and protection of an act of corruption by entering into an MOU with a competent authority or a foreign agency with similar functions to the Commission. Subsequent subclauses also highlight the role of the FID in instances where the MOU is being entered with a foreign agency. Mr. President, Clause 8 deals with the appointment of commissioners, and Clause 8 has been lifted and replaced in its entirety in the list of amendments. It provides that the 5 commissioners should be appointed from 3 categories, plus the plus of course including the Auditor General. So 4 appointed commissioners are to be selected from the categories of retired judges of appeal or of the Supreme Court, from which 2 persons shall be appointed, and the retired senior public officials with knowledge and expertise in finance, accounting or public administration, or representatives of non-governmental organizations that appear to be well established. This latter category will be amended to address the express exclusion of political organizations. Mr. President, the clause also provides, in respect of fundamental eligibility, that to be eligible for appointment, an individual must be a person of integrity, capable of exercising competence, diligence, sound judgment, and impartiality in fulfilling his or her functions. Mr. President, the process for appointment is also set out here. It is noted that the Commission is accountable to Parliament and must report to the Parliament on all matters in relation to its functions. Clause 9 deals with disqualification from membership to the Commission and at the point of appointment or thereafter. And this includes suffering from mental disorder within meaning of the Mental Health Act, bankruptcy, and of course conviction of an offence including dishonesty or moral turpitude. Mr. President, the tenure of appointed commissioners is set out under Clause 10, and that is 7 years, not exceeding 7 years, and the commissioner may be eligible for reappointment. And this, of course, is another clause which remains as is under the, as proposed by the Joint Select Committee. Mr. President, under Clause 11, the chairman of the commission is to be appointed by the Governor General and is to be a retired judge of appeal or a retired judge of the Supreme Court. In respect of an acting commissioner, Clause 12 gives power to the Governor General to appoint an acting commissioner where the commissioner is absent, where a commissioner is absent or unable to act. And it must be done, of course, in the same manner as the original appointment and from the categories which would have been required under Clause 8.1. Clause 13 addresses the matter of resignation of appointed commissioners, and Clause 14 addresses the matter of filling vacancies in the membership of the Commission. Mr. President, Clause 15 addresses the termination of appointment of an appointed commissioner, and it sets out that the GG, the Governor General, may terminate an appointed commissioner on the basis that the commissioner is unable to discharge the functions of his office, whether due to infirmity of body or mind or any other cause or misbehavior. And this is amended to expand also to expressly refer to those categories which would have been included, which would have disqualified the person in the first place under Clause 9. Mr. President, during the period of investigation, there's a tribunal to establish where there's a question raised about any termination, Mr. President. And during the period of investigation by the tribunal, the Governor General, after consulting the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition, may suspend the appointed commissioner from performing any function related to the Commission, with such termination being revocable by the Governor General, and will terminate if the result of the investigation is that there should be no termination of the originally appointed commissioner. Mr. President, Clause 17 deals with meetings of the Commission, frequency, time, voting rights, etc. This has been amended to clarify the fact that the chairman will have an original and casting vote, and we have retained the minimum period of meetings of 6 times per year, but we recognize that it is only a minimum. Mr. President, Clause 18 protects the commissioners in respect of personal liability for acts or omissions done in good faith, and Clause 19 addresses the funding of the commission as is appropriate for a commission of Parliament. Mr. President, Clause 20 addresses accounts and auditing, and Clause 21 provides that the seal of the Commission will be kept by the Executive Director. It's therefore an amended clause, and it addresses the execution of documents and how the seal will be recognized. Mr. President, Clause 22 deals with remuneration of commissioners, and Clause 23 addresses the point that the chairman and the commissioners will not be, their posts will not be public offices. Mr. President, Clause 24 addresses the mechanism, the standard mechanism for where there is no leader of the opposition and how appointments requiring such consultation are addressed. And Clause 25 addresses the power of the Commission to establish committees to assist it in performing its functions. Clause 26 provides for the Commission's ability to regulate its own procedure, and Clause 27 addresses the Commission's power of delegation to the Executive Director, a Director, or another member of staff of the Commission. And it must be noted, of course, that such delegation is revocable, and the delegation of a function shall not preclude its performance by the Commission. Mr. President, the new Part 2B inserts a new Clause 28 and a new Clause 29. Clause 28 dealing with the appointment and functions of the Executive Director. The clause specifies that the tenure of the Executive Director is to be 5 years, and he or she would be eligible for reappointment, and the manner in which the Executive Director may be terminated by the Governor-General is also set out in this section. It clarifies, Mr. President, that no one who would not be eligible to have been a commissioner could be eligible for the role of Executive Director, and also that the Executive Director must possess the skills and experience which would allow him or her to carry out the role as identified. Mr. President, Clause 29, the new Clause 29, sets out all the duties of the Executive Director, all the responsibilities, several of which were referred to earlier, and also speaks to the delegation of authorities. Mr. President, all of the clauses hereafter are now renumbered by the addition of two, by a function of 2, because we have inserted 2 new clauses, 28 and 29. So we now go to 28 renumbered as 30, 29 renumbered as 31, etc., going through. But this new Clause 30, Mr. President, old Clause 28 renumbered 30, addresses the establishment of the divisions which were spoken to earlier, and also provide for the establishment of such other divisions as the Commission may deem necessary. It also speaks to the appointment of the directors of each division by the Governor-General on the recommendation of the Commission. The Commission is of the Executive and the Executive, in consultation, with the Executive Director. Old Clause 21, renumbered as 31, deals with the separation of prosecution and investigation functions, and the investigative or prosecutorial functions of the Commission shall not be carried out by the same person. And this is, of course, for reasons which would be well understood in terms of separation of these types of powers and the rules of natural justice. Mr. President, this will also ensure transparency and fairness in the conduct of investigations and prosecutions. Mr. President, the Director of Information and Complaints will find their functions set out in Clause 30, renumbered as 32, They were spoken to earlier. The functions of the Director of Investigation, this most important pillar of the Commission, are set out at Clause 31, renumbered as 33. The Director of Investigation will carry out the investigative functions of the Commission into any allegation that involves or may involve an act of corruption or an allegation in relation to non-compliance with the Act or any complaint, information, or notification, whether referred to him by the Commission or the Director of Information and Complaints, or any other means by which a complaint would reach him or her. Mr. President, the Director of Investigation is required to submit quarterly reports to the Executive Director on the activities of the division, and it's to be noted that with the approval of the Commission, the Director is able to delegate any of his functions. However, such delegation does not prevent the exercise of the powers or performance of the duties by the Director of Investigation. Under Clause 32, renumbered as 34, the functions of the Director of Corruption Prosecution are found. This is again another important pillar of the Commission, Mr. President. In addition to providing legal advice to the Commission on matters concerned with the allegation of corruption, of acts of corruption that are referred to the Commission, the Director is given power to institute, undertake, and have conduct of prosecution subject to the powers conferred by the Constitution on the Director of Public Prosecution. The Director of Corruption Prosecution will also collaborate with the Asset Recovery Agency established under the Proceeds of Crime Act in relation to proceedings relating to seizure, forfeiture, or recovery of property relating to acts of corruption. Of importance, Mr. President, is that the Director of Corruption Prosecution is not, and this is expressly stated, subject to the direction or control of any body or person in relation to his prosecutorial functions, except, of course, those conferred on the DPP by the Constitution. Mr. President, in respect of Clause 33, renumbered as 35, we find matters in relation to the hiring of staff of the Commission. The Executive Director will advise the Commission on the appointment and employment of staff and the qualifications required for the various posts. As with other commissions of Parliament, of course, the staffing will be effected with the approval of a specially constituted committee comprising members of both houses as specified in subclause 2. Mr. President, Clause 34 addresses, renumbered as 36, addresses the reporting responsibilities of the Commission, and it indicates, interestingly, Mr. President, that there is a protection of information obtained, notwithstanding breaches of attorney-client privilege in these reports. This clause also treats with the annual reports to be submitted by the Commission on the execution of its function, which must contain the information set out in the second schedule. Mr. President, Clause 35, renumbered as 37, addresses how a complaint can be made, and there are several ways in which a complaint can be made to the Director of Information and Complaints or otherwise. The clause outlines this in detail. So again, that's 35, renumbered 37. Clause 37, renumbered 38, addresses the manner of recording of complaints that are taken by the Director of Information and Complaints. And Part 5 now, Mr. President, starts with Clause 37, which addresses the filing of statutory declarations. And these, of course, are a large part of the responsibilities of the Director of Information and Complaints. Clause 37, renumbered as 39, outlines the obligations of parliamentarians and public officials to file a statutory declaration of their assets and liabilities and income using the form set out in the third schedule. It also sets out the threshold as spoken to earlier. Clause 38 speaks to the particulars that should be contained therein, the income, assets, liabilities of the spouse and children of the declarant where applicable, and the clause also includes now provision that gifts received by a parliamentarian in excess of the value, or a public official in excess of the value of 100,000 Jamaican dollars, or such amount as prescribed by the minister, must be declared in using this form. Mr. President, Clause 39, renumbered as 41, sets out the time for making and submitting statutory declarations. And this is, of course, as it is now, a function of when one is appointed or elected and or takes up an appointment or employment under the public service. Mr. President, all statutory declarations are to be made to the Director of Information and Complaints before the last date of the third calendar month following the date on which they are due. Mr. President, Clause 40, renumbered as 40, deals with the examination of statutory declaration. 40, renumbered as 42, deal with the examination of the statutory declaration and publication of the summaries of the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition spoken to earlier. And the clause outlines that where a declaration has been properly completed, the Director of Information and Complaints will advise the Commission, and the Commission will cause confirmation to be issued to the parliamentarian or public official. And this is important because a certified copy of this confirmation, as we have now addressed under the amendments, will be recognized on the face of it in any criminal action taken against a parliamentarian or a public official in respect of the filing of these documents. Mr. President, Clause 41, renumbered as 43, addresses offences in relation to statutory declarations. The offences and related penalties for non-compliance with the provisions serve as an offence, and to not provide information requested by the Director of Information and Complaints is also an offence. Not attending an inquiry being conducted by the Director of Investigation is also an offence. Mr. President, these offences carry a maximum fine of $500,000 or a term of maximum 6 months imprisonment, and the court may also, on the amendments being proposed, make an order requiring submission of the filing of the outstanding statutory declaration. In respect of making a false statement in the declaration or giving false information at the inquiry, for these offences, there is a maximum fine, of $2 million or 2 years imprisonment. And again, the court may make an order mandating that the declaration be filed. Mr. President, the clause also empowers the Director of Information and Complaints, with the approval of the Director of Corruption Prosecution, to impose an administrative fixed penalty of $250,000 on an offending party as an opportunity to discharge any liability to conviction. But they must, of course, Mr. President, have filed the statutory declaration in order to avoid criminal liability, but pay this amount. And this can occur where there has been a delay, but a substantial delay, and one which therefore shouldn't be bypassed, but one which, having been corrected in a timely manner, and there's a scheme for this, a regime for this, Mr. President, with notices and additional time being given. So compliance therewith will allow for this to be accessed. Mr. President, in respect of expenses, because it is a reality that preparation of these declarations can actually incur a fair bit of expense where persons have companies or I suppose complex personal circumstances which require support, and expenses that are therefore incurred in preparation of these declarations shall be deemed to have been incurred in furtherance of acquiring their income, and therefore can be treated as a tax deduction. Mr. President, under Part 6, in clauses 43 to 52, renumbered 45 to 54, we start to address the powers and procedures for investigations. which set out in detail the procedure for referring matters for investigation, the conduct of an investigation, as well as the findings arising out of a complaint. And the bill at clause 43, renumbered 45, recites the powers that may now be exercised by the Director of Investigation in the conduct of an investigation. Clause 44 deals with the Director of Information and Complaints acting on its own initiative, or of course the Director of Investigation, acting on its own initiative or on the basis of complaints received from the Director of Information and Complaints. Mr. President, this section includes wide powers to summon witnesses and conduct hearings and to demand the production of evidence consistent with powers now exercised by the Contractor General. These are now being given to the Director of Investigation. And it's to be noted that the Director of Investigation is accorded the same powers as a commissioner pursuant to the Commissions of Inquiry Act in respect of attendance and examination of witnesses and the production of documents. Guidelines for the service of summons are set out, as well as the provision for payment for reimbursement for traveling and expenses of witnesses. Mr. President, the jurisdiction of the Director of Investigation in the conduct of these investigations into awards of government contracts and licenses is set out in clause 49, renumbered 51. And these powers are to be exercised by the Director of Investigation, subject only to the authority of the Commission. Mr. President, in clause 50, renumbered 52, for the avoidance of doubt, sets out the matters which can be investigated in respect of government contracts, and clause 51, renumbered as 53, address matters which are exempt from investigation by the Director of Investigation. And these are matters which include deliberations of proceedings of Cabinet or any committee of Cabinet relating to matters of a secret or confidential nature and likely to be injurious to the public interest, matters which would prejudice the relations of Jamaica with the government of any other country or with an international organization, and of course which would prejudice the detection of offences. Mr. President, removing the potential for serious harm to be done to the reputation of innocent persons is sought to be addressed in the bill at subclause 3 of this very clause 51, renumbered 53. Mr. President, the publication of unofficial release of information about an ongoing investigation is barred. Information concerning an investigation may only be reported to the Parliament with the tabling of a report. No report or public statement shall be made by the Commission or any other person in relation to the initiation or conduct of an investigation. And, Mr. President, it's also provided in the amendments that where a report is made to Parliament, it must, it's expressly stated that it must exclude anything which would, of course, prejudice any further investigations or any proceedings in relation to the act of corruption, or address any matter which would otherwise have been covered by legal professional privilege. Mr. President, clause 52, renumbered 54, addresses the findings of the actions rather that the Director of Investigations may take on completion of investigations. And these include referral of the matter to the relevant public body for appropriate action to be taken against a public officer, referral to the Speaker of the House or President of the Senate where appropriate for action against a parliamentarian, and in respect of an act of corruption in particular, referral to the Director of Corruption Prosecution, who may take such action as may be deemed appropriate. Mr. President, interestingly, the Commission is also mandated to publicly exonerate any person who may have been the subject of an investigation where it is decided that the matters that gave rise to the investigation did not constitute an act of corruption and the investigation was known. This is an important provision and again aimed at protecting the reputation of innocent persons and building trust in the organization. We don't have much.
Which one is it? Yes, thank you. Mr. President, the Speaker's time having come to an end, the allotted time, I'd ask that the standing orders be suspended so as to allow her to complete her presentation, the Minister to complete
The question is, the Minister, the standing orders be suspended in order to allow the Senator to complete her presentation. In favor? Aye. Minister?
Said 120. Mr. President, the time being 1:20, may standing orders be suspended to allow the Senate to sit beyond 1:30?
The question is that the standing orders be suspended in order to allow the Senate to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day. In favor? Aye.
Thanks. But you're still here. You sure? Thank you, Mr. President. Clause 53, renumbered as 55, Mr. President, addresses, and there's not much further to go. The Commission is granted, under this clause, granted immunity from suit, provided that the person concerned acted without malice, did not use unreasonable force, and was not grossly negligent. Clause 54, renumbered as 56, addresses confidentiality, and these clauses have been made more robust and expansive, Mr. President. Mr. President, Clause 55, renumbered 57, requires that before assuming office, the members of the Commission, as well as staff, must subscribe to an oath of secrecy, and the oath is set out in the schedules, Mr. President. The undertaking in the oath is to keep matters concerning the Commission's activities secret, both during and after their relationship with the Commission has terminated. Mr. President, Clause 56, renumbered as 58, addresses consequential amendments, including that of the standing orders of the House of Representatives, and the particulars of the composition and appointment of the committee established by this amendment, Mr. President, is set out in the fourth schedule to the bill. Mr. President, Clause 57, renumbered as 59, repeals the Parliament Integrity of Members Act, referred to earlier, and under Clause 58, renumbered 60, the periodic review that I addressed earlier is set out. In respect of Clause 5961, renumbered as 61, this clause provides for the vesting of property that belongs to the Commission of Prevention Corruption, the Office of the Contractor General, or the Integrity Commission, its transition to, or transfer rather, to the Integrity Commission established under this bill. And Clause 60, renumbered as 62, allows for the smooth transition of staff from those same institutions, Mr. President, to the Integrity Commission established under this bill. Clause 61, renumbered as 63, makes provision for the continuation of any proceeding brought against the respective, the respective commissions just named after commencement of this bill. So it preserves any active investigations or prosecutions which are underway under any of the three relevant bills. And Clause 62, renumbered 64, grants power to the Commission to make regulations necessary for the carrying out of its functions. And subject to the list of amendments, these will now include a provision for prescribing codes of conduct for the directors of the division in the conduct of their employment, their responsibilities. Mr. President, the first schedule sets out the text of the oath to be taken by the Commissioners, Executive Director, Directors, and members of staff of the Commission. Second, sets out the contents of the annual report that is to be submitted to the Parliament by the Commission. Third schedule sets out the form for the statutory declaration of assets, liabilities, and income, which are to be filed annually. Fourth schedule sets out the amendments that are to be made to the Criminal Justice Administration Act, the Corruption Prevention Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, and the fifth schedule sets out the form of the witness summons to be used, and the sixth schedule addresses the arrangements for pensions and gratuities to be paid to the Executive Director and the Directors. Mr. President, this is an important bill. It's an important provision, the work of which is now spanning several administrations. The Leader of Opposition Business as I explained, not only had a role in its initial drafting, but he chaired the Joint Select Committee, which proposed many of the provisions which exist. So I think we can consider the bill an important work of bipartisan cooperation, and it is in that context that we wish to suspend the debate on my ending this presentation to ensure that members on both sides can peruse and consider the amendments, and we will continue the debate at a future sitting. I thank you, Mr. President, and I look forward to the comments of my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Minister. So the question is that the debate on this bill be suspended for a date to be decided. In favor? Against?
Mr. President. Mr. President, I hereby submit for the consideration of this Honourable Senate a set of regulations entitled the Political Parties Registration Regulations 2017, dubbed the Regulations, which have been made by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica pursuant to Section 104(1)(a) of the Representation of the People Act. The purposes of these regulations are as follows: to provide a framework for the registration and deregistration of political parties.
Sorry, Senator Samuda, you have copies of the... They were tabled? Arrange for some copies of the...
I believe it was May 26th they had been tabled.
Senators, you're going to start it? Senator Samuda. Senator Samuda, thank you very much. We understand that as chairman of the Regulations Committee, you had piloted the regulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Minister.
Mr. President, I too add my thanks to Senator Samuda, who has been doing a most creditable job as chair of the Regulations Committee. I really have to say that he has taken on the role of chair with an energy and a commitment to detail and robust discussion that is truly commendable. Mr. President, in respect of the matter before us at this point in time, and the matter which I submit for the consideration of this Honourable House, is the Political Parties Registration Regulation 2017, which have been made by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica pursuant to Section 104(1)(a) of the Representation of the People's Act. This, like the Integrity Commission Bill, is a long-awaited a long-awaited instrument. Mr. President, the purposes of these regulations are as follows. 1, to provide a framework for the registration and deregistration of political parties. 2, to establish a procedure for registration, deregistration, and objections to the refusal of an application for registration by the Commission. And 3, to facilitate a system where an accurate and up-to-date record can be kept by each political party in operation. Political parties, we know, Mr. President, like civil organizations, must be registered in the interest of democracy. The political party must be transparent and must meet international standards of accountability and transparency. This is the way of the modern world. The registration of political parties is one of the ways in which this transformation will take place to make our democracy stronger and more fit for purpose, more meeting the needs of our modern societies. Mr. President, under Section 104(1)(a) of the Representation of People's Act, the Electoral Commission of Jamaica may make regulations subject to affirmative resolutions for the purpose of giving effect to the provisions of Part 5B of the Act, and in particular, the particular aspects, Mr. President, have been addressed under the purposes of the regulations read earlier. Mr. President, the regulations laid before this House and which were approved by the lower house on May 17th are premised primarily on this provision 5B of the Representation of the People's Act. They comprise 20 regulations which provide as follows. Regulation 2 sets out the definition of certain key terms used in the regulations. Regulations 3 to 7 stipulate the form and manner that the application for registration of a political party should take, as well as the necessary documents that should support it. Regulation 8 sets out the procedure for an application for voluntary deregistration of a political party. 9 provides that the register of political parties is to be kept by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, and also provides the nature and form of this register. And Regulation 10, Mr. President, stipulates that a political party must, before the last day of January in each successive year, following its initial registration, submit a written declaration as to its continued existence. Mr. President, Regulations 11 to 12 prescribe the procedure for changing or altering the name, identifying symbol, slogan, or color associated with the political party, and instructs that a new certificate must be issued if the name of a party, a registered political party, is changed. Regulation 13 stipulates that where a registered political party changes the location of its head office or its postal address, it must, within 14 days of the change, notify the registrar in writing by an electronic format. And Regulation 14 prescribes the form that a notice of proposal to deregister should take. Regulation 15 stipulates that where a registered political party changes the location of its head office or its postal address, it must, within 14 days of the change, notify the registrar in writing by an electronic format. And Regulation 14 prescribes the form that a notice of proposal to deregister should take. Mr. President, Regulation 15 outlines the time, form, and manner in which every registered political party should submit to the registrar a copy of its annual financial report, and 16 to 17 relate to notices to be signed by office holders, being signed by office holders, and notices to be signed by the registrar. Mr. President, Regulation 18 provides that any person who knowingly makes a false statement or knowingly furnishes false particulars in any application or other documents required by these regulations commits an offense and will be liable to summary conviction or a fine not exceeding $1 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months. Regulation 19 provides a procedure to appeal against the decision of the Commission not to register a political party, and 20 outlines the specific fees payable in respect of the certificates and other forms of authorization and services provided by the Commission. Mr. President, in support of the regulations, 2 schedules are included, setting forth the forms, required documentation, or information as prescribed in the respective regulations. Mr. President, I look forward to the comments of colleagues, if any, on these important and long-awaited regulations. I thank you.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Senator Golin,
Thank you, sir.
I am very sorry. In fact, I had asked Senator Gill to take the chair as I have an important matter to deal with briefly. So I was just trying to see if I could put it off. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Always glad to see we have your full attention.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that with bated breath, Senator Marks.
Just to clarify, my understanding of the procedure that we're following, these regulations are subject to affirmative resolution, so they're not a matter for the regulations committee as such, but must be piloted in accordance with the standing orders by a minister. So I think the procedure was correct that we eventually followed. Mr. President, clearly these are very important regulations, and they represent, I think, the final legislative stage of a process which has been underway for some time, where Jamaica seeks to embark on a road of regulating political parties. This is, of course, totally new to us because we have had political parties in this country for not quite a century, but getting nearer there, and never before has there been an attempt by Parliament to set some kind of rules around how political parties should operate. The act under which these regulations are being made is, of course, the Representation of the People Act, which is the main piece of legislation in Jamaica that governs the electoral process. And more specifically, the regulations are being made consequent on the amendment, the very substantial amendment that was made to the Representation of the People's Act. I believe the bill was actually passed at the very beginning of 2016 to introduce a new framework and regime for regulating political parties. And the methodology that is followed is one of registration by the parties and the oversight body that will have responsibility for the registration process and other aspects of the new framework for regulating political parties is, of course, the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. So there's another aspect, important aspect of this process, which is not yet complete, which is, of course, the regulations that will govern campaign financing. There was a separate exercise also completed, I believe, either in 2015 or the very beginning of 2016, where the Representation of the People's Act was amended to establish a separate framework for regulating campaign financing. And that is an extremely far-reaching set of measures as well, which will require substantial change in the way in which campaigns are financed, and will impose on those involved in campaigns significant new burdens to be compliant. And that will necessitate, I think, training and education so as to bring aspirants and campaign managers and party officials up the curve of understanding what is being asked of them. But the regulations to operationalize the more granular aspects of the campaign finance system are not yet before us. But this is the first round of this bifurcated process, which is to provide the regulations that will deal with the registration of political parties. And so we are very pleased to see this, because the legislation which has enabled these regulations to be brought here represented a fair amount of work on the part of the Electoral Commission, which of course you, Mr. President, you slightly changed your appearance. The President is a long-standing member of, and so we're glad to see that this side of things is being completed. And I must say, this is I would say, the easier side of it. It's going to represent a significant change to political parties, and it's going to take some getting used to, and give and take, I think, in how it's rolled out, because we're moving from a very different era to a new era of regulation. But nevertheless, it is, I think, a step in the right direction, and the country, I think, will be pleased to see that political parties do have to conform to some amount of transparency and accountability in how they conduct their affairs. This is, of course, registration is not going to be mandatory for political parties. Political parties may choose not to register, but if they want to potentially qualify for state funding, if state funding is ever available for this purpose, which is, of course, an unknown at this juncture. But that's hopefully, as our fiscal position improves over time and our economy strengthens, we will someday reach the point where the democratic process can be supported by some state funding, which is what is contemplated by the amendments that were made to the Representation of the People's Act. And that would be the sweetener, so to speak, that would attract parties to register so that they would qualify for that. And that is not campaign finance money. That is just money to assist political parties to cover their basic operating expenses. And I doubt would ever be 100% funding of those expenses, but would nevertheless at some point represent a meaningful contribution to those costs. And of course, those organizations are not established as income-earning organizations, so the expenses of running them have to be raised by donors. And it is, I think, desirable to reach the point where parties are not dependent entirely on the largesse of individuals and corporations, and can instead find some amount of sustenance from the state. Just looking at the specifics of the regulations, I just have a couple of comments, and I think the ECJ is represented here, so I hope that they will take note of what I have to say. A couple of minor things, but nevertheless. First of all, the definition of financial year. I think that this needs to be reconsidered, because I think the financial year there ought to be some flexibility in that, because parties don't necessarily have the same financial year. I'm not sure what the financial year of the Jamaica Labour Party is, but for the People's National Party, the financial year actually ends at the end of June. And this, from our standpoint, this is to enable us to have our accounts audited and our financial statements presented in time for our annual conference, which is in September. So when you see the relevant provision that uses the term financial year, saying that audited accounts must be presented within a certain time after the end of the financial year, this is going to necessitate, in our case, a change of our financial year, which is undesirable, because it is the way it is for a very good reason, because of how our constitution is structured and when our annual conference is in the course of the year. And in the case of the Jamaica Labour Party, I think your typical annual conference is a little later in the year than ours, so this would impact you as well. I'm not sure so I think this needs to be reconsidered, this particular point. Another point I would make is on page 2 of the regulations, in paragraph 4.3, there's a reference to registration record card numbers. And this is to do with the declaration that 500 electors must sign in support of a party's application to be registered. And the declaration must state their names and it goes on to say their registration record card numbers. But if you look at the actual form, which is a scheduled form, that it's described by another name, which is, I must confess, a name which is more familiar to me, which is the elector identification registration card, which is, of course, what is colloquially known as a voter's ID. I'm not sure why there are two different names being given to the same item, and I'm not sure which of them is the correct one, but I'm sure one of them is the correct one, probably referred to as such in the Principal Act. But I think we need to have consistency in how we refer to it. And I just want to check if there's anything else. Yes, in relation to the earlier point that I made, if you look on page 5, Regulation 15 says every registered political party shall submit to the registrar, which is the ECJ, not less than 6 months after the end of the financial year, not their financial year, a copy of the annual financial report in the form set out as Form 14. And when you look at Form 14, I believe it requires audited financials to accompany that report. So it ought to be flexible so that it can synchronize with the financial year of the entity, of the political party involved. There's no need, I think, for it to be cast in stone in the way it is. Mr. President, I'm just checking whether there's anything else I wanted to bring to. I think that was it. Yeah. So, Mr. President, just to wrap up what I have to say on these regulations, they represent the culmination of a process that has been underway for many years, a process which was a highly consultative process initiated by the ECJ with the input of civil society groups and the political parties and others, many years of consultations and discussions and reports to Parliament and what have you, which ultimately led to the very important amendments to the Representation of the People's Act that were passed I think, in this case, at the beginning of 2016. And we are glad to see that the regulations are ready and are being finalized now. They cannot be amended here, but I just wanted to bring those issues to the attention of the ECJ so they can consider them and hopefully find a way of perhaps through another short amendment or regulation rather, correct those issues. We support the regulations and we support the process that has reached this point in terms of bringing our political life to a new level. Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Golding. Senator Samuda.
Mr. President, Mr. President, I wish to associate myself with the comments by both the Leader of Government Business and Leader of Opposition Business. This is certainly a step in the right direction for the politics of this nation, a politics which I think we on both sides have to admit has lost the confidence of a sizable percentage of our people. So it is definitely a good day for us when seeing that this consultative approach, this back and forth discussion, this continuation of work started before Senator Golding has culminated in where we are today. We must bring politics out of the dark and into the light and make it visible for all to see so that the nation itself and the young people growing up will not see it as something that reeks of corruption, but rather that as a noble profession that they should look to join the various movements which are registered and give national service, not necessarily representation, but certainly through membership and contribution of time to these noble movements which have led our country's affairs, certainly even pre-independence. Mr. President, and this is not a jab per se, but certainly something I would like to see corrected, members on the other side. On a day when we have tabled the Integrity Commission bill, and a day where we are considering the regulations for the registration of political parties, I'd love your side to note that on the Instagram account of the People's National Party, it notes it as the first political party in Jamaica and in the English-speaking Caribbean. And I certainly wouldn't want history rewritten. I'm sure it is, young people working with the party, and we think it can be corrected, and we wouldn't want to disregard Marcus Garvey and contributions of others before us. All of the above. As we look at the regulations, and as Senator Golding alluded to, I know they can't be adjusted or amended here. There are a few that I would like the ECJ members to take note and certainly to add my thoughts to it. Clause 5 as it is written now takes into consideration the structures of the two major political parties in Jamaica. It doesn't contemplate a third or a fourth party where the chairman may be the leader of that party in terms of how it is written. It doesn't seem so to me. The chairman seems to take on the role as the chairman does in both of the major political parties now. So it's certainly in terms of how it's written to me. Perhaps some consideration in the future can be given to this. Clause 15, which speaks to the matter of the financial year, I too share Senator Golding's concern, as well as I would love to see this go further, Mr. President. The audited statements don't necessarily take into consideration, Mr. President, the list of our political parties' donors. If we are to truly step out of the dark, it will have to get to the point, Mr. President, where those who seek the national offices that we all do when we face each other in elections should declare their donations. Mr. President, the final comment I will make on the regulations is, no, I'd have loved it to be noted here today, but in clause 18, the penalties for making the false statements not exceeding $1 million or 6 months, I believe should have been stronger. Certainly the parties seeking to lead the country should not be making false statements when making their declarations, and these penalties should have had the vigor to send the right message. But Mr. President, generally this is a step in the right direction for the politics of the land. It is a step in the right direction for this Senate, and I support the regulations.
Thank you, Senator Samuda. Senator Skeffrey.
Yeah, that's a brief intervention. Let me commend the Electoral Office of Jamaica, Electoral Commission of Jamaica, both political parties and the all stakeholders that have made what we are debating here today a reality. It has been a long process, and I, from my own vantage point in our own political party, many executive meetings, we have a lot of discussion around this. So it's a good day that we have started the process of enhancing the transparency and accountability within the democratic process and the whole electoral system. But I have a few observations / concerns. We see where the parties have to sign a code of conduct, which is good, the officers of the party. But the challenge I have while we're reinforcing it in a regulation, every time you're in an election period, you sign code of conduct. And probably sometimes it's breached in many aspects of it. Even today, if we traverse the island, we still see political candidates' photograph from both parties up, and the political ombudsman speak and everything, and nobody listen. So if we're going to have it here, which is good for reinforcement, but we must have clear sanctions, that those who are in the breach will know that the laws and the regulations are there, and they must adhere to it, and if not, the strong sanction to protect the integrity of the system. So it doesn't make sense reinforcing it, and we are not able to deal with those that are in breach. And it's right now, we are a year and 3 months, 4 months from the election, and I go at particular parish yesterday, and I see candidates' photograph up for both sides of the fence. So I'm not here to deal with anyone, and also for the local government. So we as leaders here, and many of those, we have to encourage our candidates to deal with obeying the law, because if we are giving more authority to the commission, then we have to also deal with the sensitization for more people. Also, I see where I want to warn against institutionalizing the two political party system with this regulation. This is not a regulation for the People's National Party or for the Jamaica Labour Party. I want, in reading it, it's tend to say we are registering primarily these two parties. Let us remember that any group of citizens that share a common philosophy and ideal can form a political party to seek the support of the masses. So I want to ensure that the system is not that bureaucratic or rigid to shut out the quote-unquote small persons who want to so do. And for example, refusal for registration. Let me hope that it is not rigid refusal, but some clear basic guidelines, such as your financial statement and so on. If you cannot do that, then you are not. But it's not to ensure that the PNP and the GLP remains. If you're going to shut out one, then we know which one should shut up. But if you're going to ensure that the PNP and the GLP remains. Also, we see voluntary deregistration of a political party, and also the registration of the parties. I am thinking that if a party is deregistered, then what the sanction, you should not be able to field candidates in an election. It's not clear. However, it's not clear. But however, that's not the understanding. So it's not. So you'll not be able to get the funds. The Constitution says who's eligible. Exactly. So in terms of the registration, then is that you would not be able to get any state fund that is available. Okay, so that's clear. Because I was thinking about how you treat with the independent person that would not be able to register. So I just wanted to, thanks for that clarity. So it's the deregistration means that you are not eligible for whatever state funding is available, if and when it is available. So in general, I support the thing, but let's just say the real transformation in this issue of financing is the campaign finance regulation. That will go to the heart of what we want to address, to get out the quote-unquote dirty money from the politics, to ensure that big money, lobbyists, and those persons for their own selfish special interest does not determine who wins a seat and ultimately forms the government, but the people power will always be supreme. So I want to ensure that all the time. So, and democracy will always be the winner every time. So that's where I'm excited and really in a haste to go, how we can ensure that we limit and we don't believe that those who have that large sum of money can buy the vote, and the political education and the policies and program is not what is supreme, and the quality of debate from both parties, but those who have more cash. So this is important as we protect the democratic process of our country and ensure that we have free and fair election in all facets of life. But in general, I welcome the process. It's a good start. It's a good day for Jamaica, and it's one that we must all welcome and support as we seek to ensure political parties generally have a chance to compete in a democratic process. And campaign financing will ultimately lead to the true transformation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Skeffrey.
I'm going to speak.
Senator Lambert Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start by recognizing that this regulation reflects a growing maturity in our politics. There was a time when our politics would not have allowed us to come together in the Electoral Commission or the Electoral Office before and formulate common position on which there is consensus in both political parties. And that's progress. We've seen the work of the political ombudsman, which have sought to bring the parties together and hold us on a path of decency. And I raise these issues, Mr. President, because politics, not just here, but elsewhere, can be nasty, can be dirty. We saw on Wednesday morning in the United States, congressmen practicing for a game of baseball which would bring the Democratic Party against the Republican Party, which took place last night. That practice by the Republican Party had a major incident where the third in line in the Republican Party got shot, other people got shot, and one person was killed. I'm happy that our politics have kept us for some time out of that realm of criminality, and that by registering the parties, we are in a sense committing to separate ourselves from criminality. And that is how I see this regulation, and that is why I support it. But Mr. President, I am so happy that that maturity is being reflected, because sitting here today, I got a report from a member of parliament of a shootout in Montego Bay between KFC and Mount Alverna Prep. High-power rifle, M16 AK-47, being fired. There's a call for Mount Alverna children to be, parents to come for them now. In the middle of the day, with our people running scared, cruise ship in port, it's frightening. And I couldn't make this day pass, Mr. President, without noting my own personal disappointment that the issue of crime and the high murder rate did not attract our attention today. Did not attract our attention today. Mr. President, it scares me. I'm overly concerned that in the month of June, the murder rate is running at about
Mr. President, point of order.
Senator Brown, Senator Brown,
Point of order.
Senator Brown.
Yeah?
I will ask you kindly. I
This is
know.
what I'm doing.
Okay.
This is
All
what
right.
I'm doing. And so I'm saying that by separating ourselves from the criminals, we are not responsible as political parties for this high murder rate that is impacting the country. 7 per day. It's not a matter of a point of order. It's a matter for firm, concrete action
And
to address the issue of
Senator
crime
Brown,
in our country.
Senator Brown, you have
Yes, sir.
made your point.
Mr. President,
Can you just stick to
I want
the
to
tenets
close
of the
by
debate?
saying that as a senator, as a citizen, I am overly concerned. And those who believe we shouldn't be overly concerned ought to apologize to the nation and better yet, resign. May it please you, Mr. President.
Senator Reid?
Yes, Mr. President. We thank all the members for their participation in this discussion. And Leader, you want to? Right, so you want to move, therefore, that this motion be now approved. You want to? Sorry.
The question is that the motion be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, there's one more bill. I'm just kidding. It is not proposed. But it was, we should have been filming. No, Mr. President, I want to thank all colleagues for their participation today and to thank each and every one who participated in the instruments that were put before us, because they're all very important. And, you know, there were big steps taken today in the right direction. And I wish to also indicate that it is not intended to do any further business today. And the question is that, or rather I beg that Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Senator Morrison.
No more business. Good things, no more business. Mr. President, it is with pride that I stand on this motion at adjournment to salute the national icon of international acclaim, Dr. the Honourable Usain St. Leopold, OD, CD, who on June 10 of this year ran his final race on local soil. Whoever said that lightning cannot strike the same place twice did not meet triple lightning bolt. Were we told 15 years ago that we would have seen this talent, we would have called such an idea a notion, a myth, a fable, a phenomenon, something inconceivable. But because we saw it, the man who shattered and reset world and Olympic records time and again, the man who redefined speed and reconfigured in our minds what was possible in the sprints. We call him a legend. We thank his family, friends, and coaching staff for honing this superior talent. And while we bask in the glitter and confetti of Bolt's amazing victories, let us also be sober in acknowledging that his achievements were not attained by sudden flight. How can we craft the enthralling story of Bolt's fame that it can become a lesson to our children? Is it that he's the world's fastest man? Is it that he has innumerable trophies and have dominated 3 successive Olympics? No. The diamond in the lesson is that when he competed at the Olympics for the first time, a fledgling athlete, he failed to make it past the first round. Believe it or not, a star was born even in that moment, because despite the voices of the critics and despite the voices of the naysayers, the future saw Usain Bolt delivering scintillating performances, splintering previous records, and the opinions of those who thought that he could not have done it. Indeed, hard work, indeed, labor conquers all. The boy from Sherwood, content who attended William Knibb, his is the story of perseverance and triumph. We say to our children that regardless of our socioeconomic circumstances, you must believe in yourself. When we unearth our best in ourselves, the end result is excellence. Let us as a nation be inspired by the resilience of Usain Bolt. We must demonstrate pride that this legend is from Jamaica. We saw him and will tell the story generation to generation. We are happy that we live to see it. He did well, not only for himself, but for all Jamaicans. The Senate of Jamaica, constituted in the year of our Lord 2016, salutes Dr. the Honourable Usain Bolt. Let it be recorded that it was constituted, I know what I'm saying, Senator Brown, in the year of our Lord, this Senate, 2016, salutes Dr. the Honourable Usain Bolt. Let it be recorded that it was an honor for us to witness and salute the many feats of Usain Bolt and wish him tremendous blessing. Let us build our sporting facilities so that other potentials can be born and nurtured. Already some Jamaicans can't imagine the sprints without Lightning Bolt. Did he set the bar too high? Will his record be disturbed in this generation? Has he brought interest in the sprints to an anticlimax? Only time will tell. But today, as Jamaicans, we can boast that it is beyond a contestation that Usain St. Leo Bolt is the greatest athlete of all time. The Senate salutes a legend. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Senator Goulding.
Mr. President, we find ourselves in an unfortunate situation because the normal procedure would be for a motion on the adjournment to be cleared with the President, who would notify us that this is going to happen so we could prepare. There are many senators, I think, who would love to participate in any tribute to the great Usain Bolt. And so in a sense, this has caught us in a difficult situation. All I would say is that the senator has played a very eloquent tribute to the greatest Jamaican athlete of all time. And, as it stands today, definitely the most well-known Jamaican around the world who's alive and possibly, vying with the great Robert Nesta Marley for international popularity and renown. He is not yet done and still have something to come, and we are looking forward to his performances in London shortly, and we of course wish him very well and hope his training and preparation goes well, and we wish the whole Jamaica team all the very best of luck in those games. Usain Bolt is, anything one could say about him at this point would be a platitude. He's an icon. He's a role model. He is a phenomenon, athletically a phenomenon. And as an individual, his personality is effervescent, he's likable, lovable, and Jamaica, all of Jamaica, sees him as the great shining star that he is. So I don't wish to say much more given the circumstances other than to endorse what Senator Morrison has said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Golding. Senator Brown.
I join with Senator Golding in complaining because it's not the first time that a motion under adjournment is being taken without consultation or information to the opposition. It's not a controversial matter. We all hail the legend. We know it wasn't an easy road for him, and his successes was owed to people like Pablo McNeil, who worked with him at William Knibb. It's owed to those who helped prepare the coaches with whom he would have had to interact. And in this respect, the establishment of the G.C. Foster College for Sports. The decision for him to stay with Racers and Glen Mills. So we know there were times, because I was in the stadium, when some people booed him. We know there were down times for him. And so the message I take from this great legend is that you will be pushed down sometime. You will be on the downside. But the key thing is to get up. Get up, stand up, and keep going. Ignore the naysayers and be careful of those who lavish praise only when you have succeeded. Because that's the lesson of mankind. When you need the friends most is when you wasn't breaking the records. So when you were injured, when you had to fly off to Germany, those are the times. And I'm glad that there are many of us in the country who never gave up. And you're seeing, we will take him when he is down and when he's up. And we wish for him, going forward, wise counsel in his business affairs. So far, they have looked good. Because there's life beyond the track. And that's the other part that we must embrace. So I thank all those who assisted Usain. All of those. And I thank every child, boy and girl, who now emulate Usain. And you seen this? The people like Asafa Powell, Michael Frater, and those who were there and who were part of the triple must be praised too. Because as much as Usain is a legend, he couldn't have done it by himself. Together, we achieve much, much more. Senator, thank you. But next time, let's give us a look at notice. So we too may be as prepared as Usain. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brown.
Mr. President, It is now not intended to do any further business. May I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
The question is for the Senate to be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned.
Even when I am off duty, I am never off.
Somebody call the police!
Because I will honor my oath of office. Under any circumstances. I am a police in the Jamaica Constabulary Force.